Is science fiction really fiction, or is it just the future waiting to happen? Author Frank Herbert says it's a little bit of both.
Hi. Before the video starts, I want to recommend anybody watching to read the Dune book or just to read in general. With that being said, let's get right into the video.
My planet Arrakis is so beautiful when the sun is low. Rolling over the sands, you can see spice in the air.
May thy knife chip and shatter.
When you combine a soundtrack by the second greatest living composer alongside this beautiful man, you might just get...
I think this just might be my masterpiece.
However, there is one specific scene from Dune Part 1 that I'd like to discuss today. It is not the most flashy, and it is definitely not the most vibrant. The background here is rock and more rock. But looking past the surface, you will find quite possibly the greatest fight scene ever crafted for the silver screen. Doesn't look like it, right? Well, just let me explain. Paul Atreides, yeah, this guy? He's 15, and he's about to earn his spot amongst the Fremen. In order to do so, he must fight a man, Jamis, who has appeared before him in his dreams and said,
I will show you the ways of the desert.
Their real-life meetup was a little different than expected, though. His first remark is the very warm and welcoming,
May thy knife chip and shatter.
not directly insulting Paul, but wishing that his only means of defending himself would perish, shatter. We see the growth of Paul through his eventual assumption of this phrase, but that's a topic for a different video. Then, in the fashion of tradition, or maybe just some ill-placed respect, Paul offers a salute, an olive branch of sorts, if you will. Paul understands that just because you are going to fight somebody does not immediately make them your enemy. After all, this is the man he has had dreams about. Jamis not only refuses to return the salute, but remarks,
You should welcome my blade.
It's quite obvious Jamis not only doesn't view Paul as a real threat, but as a means to display some twisted sense of mercy by offering Paul a quick death, like putting a wounded animal out of its misery. Paul and Jamis assume their fighting stances, which instantly serve to show the difference of the two through their fighting styles and the contrast between the Fremen and the Atreides. Paul assumes a very traditional and conventional stance. His feet are bladed and his knife is held low, near his waist. Paul's life has been shrouded in tradition, ceremony, and practice, so it makes sense that his fighting style would fit his image, traditional and strategic. While Jamis, on the other hand, not only refuses to face Paul in another act of contempt, but assumes a completely different style. He is low to the ground and banging his chest. His feet are entirely parallel instead of bladed, and his first attack just personifies the lack of seriousness with which he regards Paul as a fighter. He abuses the distraction amongst the crowd to launch his first attack, a sucker punch. From the onset of the fight, it is quite frank that Jamis is going to be the main aggressor. From striking the first blow to launching into his knife attack, he fights with nothing held back, and it's obvious that he is relying more on instinct rather than technique. The attention to detail is so well done, with a fantastic performance by Baps Olusan Mokun. Olusan Mokun is so good in this role that even his breathing nails the character to a T, hyper-aggressive and nearing animalistic. All these tiny details are reinforced by the decision to leave this and all the fight scenes in the Dune movies without music, which only serves to accentuate the physical factors at play in the fights. Footsteps, gravel, breathing, all these factors make the fights even more nail-biting. Paul's initial timidness is on full display at the start of the fight, as he relies solely on his defense and training to carry him through the engagement. Even at the end of the first engagement, when it's obvious Jamis has some bad intentions, he launches his first attack and it is extremely non-lethal. It's at Jamis' leg, and it is clearly meant to weaken and not seriously or gravely wound his opponent. Paul is described as intuitive and insightful in the books.
You've worn a still suit before?
No, this is my first time.
Your desert boots are fitted slip fashion at the ankles. Who taught you to do that?
It seemed the right way.
And I believe this is a prime example of showing and not telling. After the first engagement, Paul seems to have an understanding and a growing confidence of how Jamis is going to attack him, yet he isn't really trying to hurt Jamis. He just repeatedly attempts to disarm and trap his opponent's hand, until he is knocked to the floor by Jameis. I believe this is the turning point in the fight. The dynamics have now totally shifted. Paul finally launches his first attack, making him the aggressor. After downloading Jameis's entire playbook and a futile attempt to counter, Paul now has the killing blow. Yet, in his stubborn clinging to tradition, he offers his opponent mercy, not wrath. As a Fremen, Jameis now explodes in rage, and I think this is for multiple reasons. 1. Even if Jameis overcomes Paul in this fight, he has now been embarrassed and humiliated in front of his own people. 2. Jameis's twisted sense of mercy has now been entirely flipped on its head. Instead of putting a wounded animal out of its misery, as Jameis felt he was doing with Paul, Jameis is now the wounded animal, who is being kept alive solely out of Paul's equally misplaced sense of mercy and justice on an unforgiving and practically lawless planet. 3. Jameis is egging on Paul to kill him because he knows that the mercy being offered to him would not be offered to Paul if he were in the same situation. Jameis now knows that he has to die to fulfill his purpose, to leave a lasting and impressionable lesson. Finally, Jameis knows that he will have been slain by Lisan al-Gaib, the chosen one that his people have waited centuries for. Not only does he have to face death, but he has to face death while staring at his only chance of hope. Paul's dreams had come true. Jameis had taught him the way of the desert.